Hi everyone, welcome to Mission BX. Mission BX is a collaboration between BronxNet and Hostos Community College, and I'm your host, Eileen Newman. What we do on Mission BX is we go and visit nonprofits all over the Bronx to highlight the wonderful work that they're doing. Today, we're here at Bronx Defenders, and we're going to be speaking with the Executive Director, Justine Olderman, and we're going to find out about some of the extraordinary work they do, making lives better for people in the Bronx. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. As I said, we're going to be talking to Justine Olderman from Bronx Defenders. Justine is the executive director, and we're really excited to be, I'm excited because I know Justine and she's great, and I love the work that Bronx Defenders does. So.
I'm super excited to be here as well. Thanks, Eileen.
So, Justine, tell us about Bronx Defenders, because there are probably people who know and people who don't know. So, what do you do here? It's a great space with all these wonderful pictures.
So we are a public defender nonprofit, and what that means is that we represent low-income people in the Bronx who are navigating the various legal systems. So that means the criminal legal system, family legal system, housing system, immigration system.
And how did that start? How long? Well, I can say happy anniversary.
Thank
you.
You
can talk
Thank
a little
you.
bit about when it started and who started it and how many years.
Yeah, so we are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, which is incredibly exciting for us. Hard to believe. I've been with the organization 22 years. And you know, when we first opened our doors back in 1997, there were 8 people working in a small storefront space that was across the street from what's now the Hall of Justice in the shopping center. And at that time, the organization was just working in the criminal courthouse, so just representing low-income Bronx residents who were facing criminal charges. But when our founder, Robin Steinberg, came and those additional 7 people came, they had this idea that, that we could be doing better than what public defense had been doing. That there was an opportunity here with a brand new community-based public defender office to build on the best that we had seen in the field, but really go to the community that we were serving and asking of them, what is it that you need and want in your community public defender office? And you know, we asked that question because we sort of had this North Star, right, of sort of this question of how can we be doing it better? And we learned that there were lots of ways we could be doing it better. One of the ways that we heard from the community that we could be doing it better is that, of course, anybody who has legal entanglement in the criminal justice system is going to want a defender who knows the law, deeply investigates their cases, comes prepared, is skilled in the art of persuasion, whether cares about them, is empathetic, cares about them as a human, will help them navigate the system. But what they also wanted was that their community public defender office understood, cared about, and worked on addressing what the drivers were of that system involvement. What is the story that brought them to this legal entanglement in the first place, right? What are the issues, the challenges that they were facing in their communities that sort of set them up in many ways to end up in the criminal legal system? So we heard that. The other thing that we heard, which was really quite new back then, it may seem obvious to people now, is that once somebody's case ended in the criminal legal system, that touch point was triggering a cascade of what we now sort of refer to as perpetual punishments that was leaving them entangled in various legal and non-legal, punitive systems. So for example, what we learned is that, and I learned this personally as a young defender, I might meet somebody who had a felony drug case. And let's say I investigate the case, I work with the client, we decide ultimately we're going to try to get the best plea bargain we can. And I resolved that case with a misdemeanor charge, no jail or prison time. By traditional metrics, I would have done well for my client. And that person would have felt satisfied by the services that I had offered. But what we didn't realize in those early days is that that resolution of the case, that by traditional public defender metrics seemed really good, could land somebody in deportation proceedings. It could mean that they were evicted from their home and rendered homeless. It can even trigger a child welfare investigation and lead to family separation. And so in those early days when we learned from the people that we were serving that they needed more than just people who were really good in the courtroom, even really caring people that were good in the courtroom, we realized that we needed to actually build a different model for public defense.
So you realized that, but then how did you go about doing that?
So very slowly, sort of very incrementally, one step at a time. So the first thing that we did was we brought in, we sort of expanded the view. We brought in people with different skill sets than the ones we had. So we brought in a civil lawyer who mapped out all of the various different consequences of criminal justice involvement to help us understand what did we need to tell people we were meeting about the possible consequences beyond the criminal case of their legal entanglement. And then we brought on an immigration attorney to help advise the lawyers who were practicing and the clients about potential immigration consequences. And it just grew slowly from there, one person at a time. At the same time, we were expanding our social work practice. Now, when we opened our doors, we always opened our doors with the idea that social work was an integral part of what we were there to do, because we were meeting people at some of the worst moments in their lives. Mm-hmm. And if we both wanted to support them as they navigated these really painful moments in their life, the legal entanglement, but we also wanted to help connect them with services and resources that would address some of the underlying issues, then that's not the skill, that's not what we're taught in law school. So we set about building our social work practice, building our immigration practice, building our civil practice, and building our family law practice so that we could be in a better position to essentially go wherever our clients needed us to go.
So I'm really interested in this, and then the social work piece, I mean, in all of it, but the social work piece also. And oftentimes I will have, and this is the sort of scenario that I have, somebody will call me, often a man who has been involved with the system and wants to create a nonprofit. And the conversation is always, I don't want this to happen to, I see young men all the time, I want to help them. And when they come and meet with me, they lead with, I was in prison. And during the course of, if it's a half-hour conversation, that sentence will come up 3 or 4 times until I say, that is not who you are, that is what happened to you at a certain point. And so for me, listening to this, you talk about the social work piece, I think that's so important because you have to rebuild people's sense of themselves.
It's true. First of all, people they need support while they're navigating the system. And also we do meet people who have had multiple instances of entanglements with the criminal legal system and the other legal systems as well. And one of the things that, there are sort of 2 things that over the decades that we have been doing this work, we have come to realize, I've come to realize a lot of things, but there are 2 things that relate to what you're talking about. And one is that, we like to think in the United States that we have this great legal system, that it protects people's rights, that, we believe in sort of justice and liberty for all. And the truth is that when you work inside the legal system and you meet people who are impacted by the legal system, and not just the criminal, all of these different systems that we touched upon, you realize that these systems actually cause unbearable amounts of trauma and harm. And what we see is that they don't just cause trauma and harm for the individuals navigating them, but none of us exists in a vacuum. We exist as part of families, we exist as part of communities, and that trauma and that harm radiates out, and it passes from generation to generation. And so one of the things that we, have built our organization around is try to mitigate that harm and support people who are navigating what are really very oppressive legal systems. But at the same time, one of the things that we realized over the course of our 25 years is that as defenders who sort of operate inside the belly of this legal beast, we have a front row seat to the harms that it causes. And it's made us realize that we not only have a responsibility, but we have an opportunity to try to address not just the individual issues that people are struggling with in a given moment, unmet mental health needs or family trauma, but to really address the systemic drivers of system involvement, right? I mean, you know this, you've been working in the Bronx for so long. Like the history of what has happened in this community and the communities we serve is that you have, decades of intentional divestment from low-income, communities of color, and that the divestment of resources and support systems that wealthier, whiter neighborhoods like the one I came from, benefit from. What replaced that is a system of surveillance and policing. And I don't just mean policing by the NYPD, policing in all of its forms. Policing takes the form of ACS. And we meet people who are just as fearful about a knock on their door from ACS as being stopped on the street corner by the NYPD or having ICE come to their place of employment. Or school. And so one of the things that sort of defines our evolution in the last 25 years is that as we are constantly asking ourselves that question about how can we do it better, it means that we are never one thing. We're never static. We've never arrived. It requires us to constantly grow and evolve. And one of the ways that we are, evolving and growing now is to really take our proximity, connection to, partnership with people who are harmed by these legal systems, our expertise about these legal systems, and try to use that to bring about systemic transformation.
So that's a great point for us to take a break for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and continue this conversation with Justine. Hi, we're back with Justine Olderman from Bronx Defenders, and actually this show could go on for an hour because there's so much that's so interesting and in some ways heartbreaking, but also wonderful because of the work that Justine and the people who work with her are doing. So let's go back, and I want to know about you and how you got involved in this. I can picture you, Justine, as like the young lawyer who's going to change everything.
So I had a very transformative experience myself when I was in law school. I had an internship with the Legal Aid Society in their criminal defense practice. And I was being mentored by a very seasoned attorney there named Susan Laskoff. And I went to court with her one day, and I had the opportunity to meet a client that she had been working with. And the prosecutor that day had made this person a one-time offer. If he didn't take it, no offer was going to be made. He had to go to trial, and he was facing decades of incarceration if he lost. And I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with him that day. The lawyer was off and needed to handle other things. And I had nothing to offer this man as he wrestled with this very difficult decision, except just to listen and to be an ear and be a person across the table from him. And over the course of the time that I met with him, he essentially talked himself into taking this plea and grappled with the fact that it was a 7-year sentence and that he was going to be leaving behind a young daughter and that he was going to miss those years of her childhood. But he wanted the guarantee that he would be there at some point while she was growing up. And when he went down into the courtroom, he took the plea and he began to cry. And as I stood next to him, I began to cry. We get back to the office, and the next thing we know, we are being summoned by the judge and his court attorney to come back to his chambers. And he accused my mentor of bringing in somebody who had a personal relationship with the client and who was not actually an intern. We produced my identification. We showed that I was, in fact, a student at NYU. And they proceeded to tell me that I was not cut out for the work because I needed to be stronger than that. And that if I was that impacted by this particular person taking this plea, then I should go into civil practice. And I thought to myself right then and there that day, my God, if this is what defines our criminal legal system, that there should be no humanity, there should be no caring, there should be no understanding of the impact that that was going to have on him and this little girl and the rest of his family and his community, well, then it was pretty clear where I needed to be. I needed to be right there next to as many people as I could, standing between that system that tries to deprive that man of his humanity and separate him from people who care about him. I needed to be next to him and standing before that and trying to stop that from impacting people who are going through the criminal legal system.
So what was your next step in terms of your career and your life?
Well, I'd like to say it has been varied and that I have had lots of different experiences. But the truth is that I came here pretty soon right after law school. And I have been here ever since for the last 22 of our 25 years.
And how did you find out about Bronx Defenders?
I found out about it through a professor of mine from NYU. He said there's a brand new public defender office that just opened a few years ago. Up until now, they were not allowed to hire people that didn't have lots of criminal defense experience. Okay. I was brand new. I was right out of law school. And he said, but it just changed, and they are hiring their first class of new lawyers, and I interviewed for the position, and I walked through the doors. It's where the Hall of Justice is now, is Old Bronx Ice House on Grant Avenue. That stretch of Grant Avenue no longer exists, but I walked in and I met with these 5 lawyers, including our founder and former executive director, Robin Steinberg. I walked out of that interview and I just knew there was not only nothing else that I wanted to do with my career, there was no other place that I wanted to do it.
And so how does it work now? How do you get lawyers? Are lawyers here all the time? Or do you have people who volunteer? Or how does the whole process work?
So we are, when I started back in 2000, we were 25 lawyers, advocates, social workers, investigators, administrative professionals. We are now 450 approximately. And our lawyers come to us predominantly right out of law school. We have one of the best training programs for young lawyers and advocates in the country. And actually, we just have a new class that started on Monday. We have 58, I think, people who started on Monday with us. And we also, seasoned lawyers will come and work for us who come from, other jurisdictions, practicing in other public defender offices. It's all full-time staff. And the way we meet our clients is we sort of have 3 different ways that we meet people who need our services. The biggest way is through the courthouse itself. So when someone gets arrested, if I have something to do with it, they will start getting a lawyer at the moment that they get arrested. We're not there yet. I hope to help get us there. But people are assigned a lawyer when they get to the courthouse and when they first see a judge. We call that first appearance. Or in the criminal context, it's called arraignments. So we get assigned to clients at arraignments. We are assigned to work in the courthouses certain days and certain nights. So people who get arrested are supposed to see a judge within 24 hours. So they have night court, runs until 1 p.m. So we have people who work in the courthouse, will meet clients for the first time, and then continue to work with them until the resolution of their case. Now that we have right to counsel in housing court, which is a new city-wide initiative that we were instrumental in helping bring about and now participate in as legal representation. We also meet people for housing court cases through first appearance in housing court. The same thing in family court. We represent parents who are in danger of having their children removed. So we represent parents at their first appearance and stay with them all the way through the proceeding, and also people facing deportation proceedings. That courthouse is actually down in Manhattan, but we represent people at their first appearance there as well. But the second way, so the first one is through the courthouse, assignment of lawyers, and then the second way is through internal referrals. So if I'm a criminal defense attorney and I meet somebody who gets a call from ACS, right? They are my client with a criminal case, but I know ACS is about to launch an investigation, and you are, in the family defense practice. I'll say, Eileen, my client just got a call from ACS.
To work together.
Can I put you in touch with the client? And then you and I will begin to work as a team on behalf of that client. So we work in these interdisciplinary teams where the idea, one of our board members referred to us as the people's law firm. The idea is that it's sort of one-stop shopping, right? And that we work in interdisciplinary teams. We coordinate, we collaborate, we're in constant communication with one another so that I make sure now that I don't do anything that's going to harm the same person, what you're doing with that client in family court. So that's the second way, is through internal referrals. And the third way is through community intake. When we came to the Bronx, and after we left our first location, we decided it was really important for us to have storefront. We wanted the visibility in the neighborhood. We wanted people to walk by and say, oh, Bronx Defenders, what is that? Maybe they can help. And what we began to realize is that we had an opportunity by having a storefront to sort of open our doors and allow people to come in when we are open, to ask us anything, to bring to us any legal or non-legal issue that they may be facing. And we may not have expertise in that area, but it helps us do two things. One, it helps us put our finger on the pulse of what the needs are in the community, which helps us, again, chase that North Star of how can we be doing it better? What does the community need from us? But also, once we had been here for a while, we built relationships with other Bronx-based organizations. So we could pick up the phone and say, I have somebody who just came in. They need somebody to help them with a will, or they need somebody to help them. It's not what we do, but we could help connect people to resources. Because one thing we know is that, when you are grappling with a complex cluster of legal or even social service needs, it can be very hard to figure out where to go. And a lot of people spend a lot of time knocking on doors, going places, making phone calls just to get bounced around from one place to the next. So sometimes we are able to actually take on people's legal matters, and we'll refer them into one of our core practice areas. And if we can't, then we feel like it's an important service to the community to be able to connect them with somebody who can.
So this has been great. I have to say thank you, and we're going to have to wrap this up because we have another whole part of what you do that we're going to be featuring as part of the show. But I want you to mention the gala. So tickets still available.
They are definitely available. It's going to be a great night. What's especially exciting about it is that we haven't had an event in 3 years. And it's a wonderful opportunity to bring together, nonprofits, in the Bronx, our supporters, the law firm community, the corporate community that supports advancing justice in the South Bronx and beyond. And we're going to be honoring Fat Joe this year. He's been doing so much work, and especially the work that, he did around the Bronx fire, and raising money for people who are impacted. We're going to be honoring the founders of the Bronx Community Foundation. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a dream of many people in the Bronx. Absolutely. That, it was long overdue. And these two brothers, Desmond and Derek Lewis, were able to actually get this off the ground. And not only that, to be able to provide really concrete resources to people during COVID at such an incredibly needed time. So we'd love to have you there, Eileen, and your BronxNet team. And for any of your audience members, we would love to have you come and join us.
So just let's hear how you get tickets, when it is.
So it's on October 13th. And you can get tickets by going on our website. If you go to thebronxdefenders.org, you will be directed to how to buy tickets.
And how could you not want tickets for that event after hearing all of this great stuff? So, Justine, thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
And we're going to be moving into a whole other dynamic of what's happening here at Bronx Defenders. So stay tuned.
Today we're here because we have our office hours for our Bronx Cannabis Hub, which is a resource center for Bronx community members who have been harmed by the war on drugs and over-policing in many communities around the state, but more particularly in the Bronx. We provide a service that the state and the city are not providing, although this legislation has written into it the requirement of having an equity lens and making sure that those most severely harmed by this war on drugs are also first and centered in the emerging economy. There's really no organization that's really working with community members, many of whom have faced bureaucratic barriers for generations, right, to now be able to access this opportunity. So the state has announced a 30-day window for which they will issue 150 cannabis dispensary applications, and we are working feverishly with limited resources to really help community members access those applications. We're helping them with documentation, we're helping them set up their business structures, gather old conviction information, and then we're connecting them with our pro bono law firm partners who will help them in finalizing and ultimately submitting their applications to the state licensing board.
I was watching the TVs, and while watching TV, I ran across what's going on with the Bronx Hub, helping people out to marijuana licenses and whatnot. I have several convictions for marijuana. As a youngster, I always wanted to own my own business. I had to sell marijuana in order to get finance and to get the business going. And in the process of doing that, I did start the business, but I also got caught selling marijuana too. While I was still incarcerated, they started the process of legalizing it all throughout the United States. I felt as though this is an opportunity for me to get back, maybe what I deserve. I'm in the construction industry, and I've been passionate about what I do. I want to open a business in the northeast section of the Bronx, up where I'm from. The Bronx Cannabis Hub has helped me a lot. I've been receiving a lot of help with filling out the applications. The Bronx Cannabis Hub actually helped me a lot. Whenever I need, I can always come down here, and get the help I needed.
That's all we have time for today, I'm sorry to say, but I think it was a really interesting journey to see of the day-to-day work that Bronx Defenders does, and also to see the new initiative that is happening here at the Hub. So if you missed a part of the show or you want to see it again, just go on BronxNet.tv and look for Mission BX, and make sure to join us the next time we go to visit another wonderful Bronx nonprofit. Thank you.